project-based learning. I want to first start you off with the understanding that you know a lot more about project-based learning than you might assume. And the way you're going to figure this out is through a story I'm going to tell you about a really project that's near and dear to my heart. And this project starts with a pile of lumber and a hammer. That's right. It's nothing more than a pile of lumber and a hammer. And you're going to see how those two things play themselves out in this story. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about my family and where my mom grew up. My mom grew up in Washington. And you could see here, this is not showing you Washington, but this is showing you some of the islands off the Washington coast. And she had always traversed through this region, through these channels on her parents' boat. They're very much sea sailors. And they had always talked about what it'd be like to have property out here in the San Juan Islands. If you haven't been in the San Juan Islands, they're a beautiful stretch, archipelago of islands off the coast of main coast of Washington. And I'm going to fast forward to when her and my dad were married, and they were visiting Washington and visiting their parents, and they took one of those famed trips, and it really brought her back to her childhood. She always had a dream of having property out on the San Juan Islands. And this particular island, Decatur Island right here that you see pictured, was having a particular sale of property, which you can get $15,000, $20,000. You can get an acre, 2 acres, I think is an acre or 2 acres of land at that time, which was a great deal. And so they decided, we're going to purchase some property and we are going to build a cabin. Now, something you should know about my parents is that my parents, whereas they're very handy people and very resourceful, they didn't have a lot of home building experience. Of course, they had been involved in a home building project when we were first born, or when we were 6 years old, when we moved out to Jamul, San Diego. But really, they were more involved in just setting up the contractors and the construction to be done, not necessarily the building themselves. So knowing that, they wanted to get a cabin on this particular property that purchased in Decatur that was fairly easy to put together, kind of like a kit home, one of those ones you maybe see today, those special homes that you see on the Discovery Channel that are really easy to put together. So they expected to get a kit home. And so they planned one summer to go all over there and put that kit home together. And so instead of arriving to a kit home in Decatur Island, this is what they arrived to. They arrived to a shipment of lumber. Literally, this was the lumber that was dropped off on the property. You can imagine my parents' embarrassment thinking they're getting a kit home and start their dream right away and build it in a month and a half. And this is what they arrived to. It was their ultimate dope moment. So now most people might think, okay, I'm in way over my head. Don't know what we're doing here. Let's reconvene. Let's circle back. Let's go back home, find out what we're going to do. Not my parents. They're super resourceful people. They decided they had to solve this problem. They got this pile of lumber, and they had a dream to build a cabin. Now, I forgot to mention that it wasn't just them. It was their 4 14-year-old boys. I'm a quadruplet. That's right, 4 boys born at one time. And their 4 14-year-old boys that they brought with them, they were not going to suffer the embarrassment of having a pile of lumber dropped off that they couldn't do anything with, and then 4 boys eager to work. That's 4 easy manual labor positions that you have for free. So they got to decide, how are they going to best utilize us? So here's their question. How do you build a 2-story cabin with 4 14-year-olds on a tight budget with a limited knowledge base, and all you got is a pile of lumber? And so I want to pose that question to you. I want you to think about that. What would you do in this situation? How would you get this particular cabin built? Where would be the starting point? Okay? Because we were faced with the same dilemma, and I'm sure because you are a resourceful person, you're watching this project-based learning tutorial, you would maybe have some ideas of what to do. So here's maybe one of the things you might have thought of. First of all, they had to get a contractor. This is the contractor. His name is John. And we went knocking door to door to basically find someone who's a contractor. And so once we figured out there was one good contractor located on the island, we sucked up his services right away. He happened to have some free time during that summer. And we said, hey, how would you like to help us come build a cabin? He said, certainly. So we got him, the contractor. Bam. One of those things checked off our list. Now, once we had the contractor, we had to figure out, well, how do we do this foundation? Now, there's a couple things you got to consider with the foundation. You got to think, how high does a foundation need to be so you can stand and see the water? Another thing you got to consider is, which way is the sun rising? And where would you like that to face? Where would you like all the windows to face? How do we keep the home cool in the summer and warm enough in the winter? Lots of things to consider. We had to consider too, how do you get the permit to contract this kind of work, because the foundation is one of the most important parts of the house. This is one of my brothers who's putting together some of the last final touches on that foundation. Another thing we had to figure out was how do we do the plans? How do you do the floor plans? And how do we take architectural renderings and ensure that everything is done to scale properly so that when we build this thing, it gets approved and it's really serves to our liking and it stands for a long time. So here's my mom reading up on some of the plans that she had done. She had actually taken a drafting course as a community college course, and she was brushing up on her knowledge. So she discovered that she had some of a knowledge base in order to solve this particular dilemma. So that's her reading up on that, and that's the tent that we camped in over the summer while we were building the home. Next thing you got to do, you got to figure out how to use tools, and you got to figure out not only how to use tools, but how they're useful in actually aligning things to correct proportions. So here's my dad sawing off some of the edges of some of the lumber that made up some of the walling of the place, using a level to ensure that it was level as well. So there's some mathematical principles, obviously, that he had to learn. So this is using some of those tools. Another thing you've got to learn how to do is work together. Now, I don't need to tell you more than the fact that there are 4 14-year-old boys. So if you have boys yourself, if you're a parent, or if you're young and you've seen the way in which boys interact, there's a lot of collaboration that needs to happen. So this is us collaborating, working together. One of the few times. There's definitely some other times we are arguing, putting together one of the walls of the house. Another thing you have to know is that there is going to involve some break time as well. And how do you really budget and allocate your time to get this done? So we really had to break that project up into different components. We knew we couldn't get it done in one summer. So this shows us kind of relaxing, taking one of our breaks. And again, involving that kind of collaboration, working together to get this job accomplished. Another thing you're going to have to know to build a house has more than just constructing the walls. You got to do the septic as well. So this is the septic tank was delivered out on a truck. Previously, we were told that we had to dig a trench and connect the pipes to the housing, and ultimately it's got to get into the septic tank. So here's some people that were hired to put that septic tank in. So we had to utilize experts in very different fields, whether it's septic, electrical, or plumbing, or engineering, or architecture, or drafting. And so here's them helping us put together that septic tank. Now the next one I'm going to show you, if you have a queasy stomach, you might want to look away. It's not too bad, but it's a pretty bad bruise, and I'm going to tell you the story about this particular bruise. This is a bruise that my mom had suffered during a fall. And one of the things you have to understand through projects is that if things are going to be hands-on, accidents are going to happen, and that's okay because it's the only way you learn. This particular happened because my mom was working on one of the walls. One of the power tools got stuck into that wall. She, as a classic kind of cartoon character, in trying to get that power tool out, pulled a little bit too hard and ended up going backwards with that power tool, tripped over some of the lumber that was right behind her, and fell. She was on the second floor, mind you, and all there was an open gap. There's no staircase. Fell all the way to the first floor. Imagine this, she falls all the way to the first floor. The thud was so loud, my dad and the contractor heard it from outside and ran in immediately. You can imagine the horror that they experienced once hearing that thud. And my mom looks, turns around, brushes off her leg and goes, "Oh my God, I think I'm okay." And got up from that, other than obviously that very big bruise. So that's some of the things that happen in a project, in a home building project, is there's going to be some accidents. Another accident, the contractor cut off half of his finger and had to be life flighted out of there. So I'm not saying that needs to happen, but sometimes that does happen, and it's part of the experience. And finally, once you get all those components together, this is the payoff point. This is what we were constantly looking forward to, as a finished cabin. And this shows the cabin finished in one of the winter storms that was ensued. Of course, we didn't do it all this summer. It took a couple of summers and winters, but that was the final project. And I really want to draw your attention to the fact that we did not know much going into it. We did not read up on books about how to build a cabin. We did not hire a contractor ahead of time. We had not secured every single penny that we we're going to need for all the unforeseen parts of the home to build. We did not read every single manual about how to build a septic or electrical. I'll tell you what, we learned as we went. We knew what the outcome was. We wanted a cabin, and we wanted it 2 stories, and we wanted it to be facing the water. That's it. And we had a simple question: how do you get 14-year-old boys with no experience and a limited knowledge base and a limited budget to do that? So I'm using that as a preface for you guys, okay? You might see where I'm going with this, so I'm going to pull the rabbit out of the hat now. And actually, sorry, I did pull the rabbit out of the hat. Now I'm going to reveal some of the secrets behind that. That project involved a simple outcome, and it involved a simple question or statement about what we were going to do, and the parts made sense along the way. And without getting into too much detail about those parts, because we are going to discuss what those components are in a project-based experience, I want you to take this time, and there's a Word document that is included right below this particular video lesson. And please take about 20 to 25 minutes to reflect on what was your most memorable project. It doesn't have to be something you experienced in school. If it is, that's perfectly acceptable. Maybe it was a science fair of some sort, or history day, or some kind of trip that you took. That's fine. But if it's outside of school, even better, because the world that we live in is very project-based. I want you to take some time and just discuss your most memorable project. Just talk about the experience, talk about the challenges that you faced, and there's going to be some guiding questions that's going to help you in this particular reflection. So see that Word document. I will see you in our next lecture where we pull the rabbit out of the hat and we start to dissect a little bit around the mystery of what project-based learning is. I will see you soon in the next video module. Bye-bye.